Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Professor Hall. Last time we talked about rhetoric and we discussed how people use their understanding of the audience as well as the type of article that they're writing and their tone to help persuade people. So we discussed a little bit about understanding audience demographics, knowing what type of audience member you have, if they're a layperson or if they're an expert in their field, and then also using tone. So having a tone maybe that's angry or inspirational or hopeful or sad to try to persuade people. And today we're going to continue talking about rhetoric, which is the art of arguing, to discuss how people use three different, sometimes they're called types, sometimes they're called pillars. They are called ethos, pathos, and logos. So they're three types of argument or three pillars of argument that help people persuade others to think or do or believe what they want them to think or do or believe. And little cartoon here, I miss bit strips. Ethos, persuading people by using your credibility. So the king says, "As king, I know all roads lead to Rome." And the father says, "Son, the king knows everything, even the roads that lead to Rome." So having credibility, establishing ethos. We're going to talk about each one of these in a moment. Pathos, persuading people on emotional appeal. You will never be satisfied in life if you don't seize this moment. Do it. Get on the swing. And the girl thinks, I don't want to regret not taking this opportunity. And then logos, persuading through reasoning. So someone says, we should move production to Singapore. Manufacturing costs are cheaper. Also, apparently fire Gary for being on his phone. Three types of argument. So a lot of times people get these types of argument kind of mixed up, but we're going to go through them one at a time and give some examples. Ethos. Ethos occurs when readers are persuaded because of an author's character. So sometimes this can mean they believe you if you're a good person. But also, if you think about advertising, this is used a lot. We're a solid company. We care about our consumers. There's ads right now on for Uber where the guy from Uber says, I've just taken over Uber, and ever since I've taken over, I've been listening to customers and making changes that will help you, right? So saying that you're trustworthy, people are more likely to believe you if you're a good person with an upstanding character. Think about an election. Would you vote for candidate A at the top from North Carolina? He spent taxpayers' money on his mistress while his wife was dying of cancer. Candidate B, running against him, a faithful husband and father, whose family apparently really likes jeans as well as riding horses, right? But you can see, why are the dogs there? Why is the baby there? It's an argument in a picture, and it's so genius. He's there with his wife. They're all kind of dressed alike, showing that they're a team. They have a big house, but they're still down-home country folk, and they love animals and babies, right? The thing about ethos is that it can be very direct, like I was saying with the ads from Uber. Hey, we're a good company, trust us. But a lot of times it can be other things that are part of your writing or an author's writing. Having their facts checked, making sure that all of their facts are cited properly, making sure that they have proper grammar and spelling through the whole thing, making sure that they get both sides of a story, not being biased. All of those things play into ethos. This is the same word, by the way, that we get ethics from. So if you think about how they're making an ethical argument, sometimes an ethical argument can be very plain too. If I'm trying to persuade someone to be a vegetarian, that's an ethical argument a lot of times. I could talk about health benefits, which would be a different type of argument, but I would probably start with talking about cruelty to animals and that sort of thing. So building up ethos in that way. 4 components of ethos. Number 1, trustworthiness. This is basically what I've been talking about. Does your audience believe you are a good person who can be trusted to tell the truth? Sometimes the articles that I'm giving you for this unit, they're not really going to be trying to show the author's trustworthiness, but they might be talking about the trustworthiness of someone else or of an organization, or they might be talking about trying to paint someone else as untrustworthy so that you believe them more. So that's just something to look for. Similarity. Does your audience identify with you? Now, I have a picture down below of Gwyneth Paltrow with her website and magazine Goop, and she gets a lot of flack for this magazine because a lot of people don't identify with her. So they don't trust her, and they think that she is maybe pretentious. There are other people who want to aspire to be like her, and they want to identify with her, and so they trust her more. Authority. Do you have the formal or informal authority relative to your audience? What does that mean? Well, at the top there, I have that author bio of Joe Gardner. He was writing about cloud hosting, if you see that, in particular UK government cloud hosting, but he's an ex-restaurant manager. So I just think that's so funny because, and he likes guitar and Linux. So does he have the expertise to write about what he's writing about? He was an ex-restaurant manager, but now he's a product development manager. Well, I'd have to know a little bit more about what he does with the product development. Does he do something with cloud hosting? Has he helped develop things for cloud hosting? That sort of thing. So reputation is last one. How much expertise does your audience think you have in this field? It sort of goes along with authority, but it means usually that people can identify you. So when you are looking at articles, these are the questions to ask. Besides the stuff that we talked about last time, how is this person trying to persuade me? How am I being manipulated to believe or do something? So to begin with, are they using a certain tone? Are they using key buzzwords to change my mind about things? Are they making me feel empathetic or sympathetic, which we'll talk about emotions in a minute? But with their tone, are they trying to make me angry? Are they trying to make me happy? With their audience, what do they already know about me? If you're using any type of smart device, your data is being tracked. So a lot of times articles pop up that are of interest to you. They know things about you already. Sometimes they'll know your demographics. Sometimes they'll know what other products you've purchased in the past, that kind of thing. Google results are sort of tailored to you in this way as well. So that is the first thing. How are we being manipulated? And ethos, or persuaded, I guess I could put it that way. And ethos is kind of similar. How are they trying to use their position to persuade people? So are they a celebrity? Do they have a reputation? Do they come from a company or a newspaper or a journal that has a good reputation? So I mentioned, I think in a different video, TMZ. TMZ is a celebrity gossip kind of thing, right? Their reputation is for being slime balls and for following people around. So if they have an actual news story, they're going to have to go a long way to show, hey, I know we have a horrible reputation, but we have to overcome that. Increasing your ethos. When you yourself are writing, having a thesis statement that is extremely clear. We're going to talk more about writing thesis statements later, but having a clear thesis statement, taking a clear position, supporting your claim, your position by external sources, clearly showing how those sources support your thesis statement, and refuting counter arguments. So what does that basically mean? It means that you have a clear point of view, you are being honest about what that point of view is, and you are supporting your point of view with actual evidence that comes from trustworthy places. And then again, at the bottom there under general, being free of spelling and grammar errors, Not having first-person narration. So this is not just something that's based on your opinion and your life, but that you actually have found evidence to support your argument. And then also not expository. So it doesn't summarize everything. It doesn't just repeat what you've said before. There's more to it than that. Doing all of those things increases your credibility when you're writing. And even though you're not at the point yet probably where you have a reputation or you have authority in a certain subject, to the extent that you could write about it for a professional magazine, although maybe you do, and that would be interesting. But these are some basic things that you can do to increase your trustworthiness, and not plagiarizing would be on here as well. So the second pillar is pathos. Pathos occurs when readers are persuaded because you appeal to their emotions. So first, you're appealing to their sense of trustworthiness. Do they feel like you're trustworthy? Do they feel like you have authority? Do you have a good reputation? Now, this takes it in a different direction, different type of argument. Basic emotions, joy and sadness, fear and anger, surprise, trust, those kind of things. Advanced emotions, optimism, love, remorse, contempt, awe, aggressiveness. I have this little wheel here on the side because it's some interesting words that when you're happy, you feel fulfilled. You feel satisfied. You feel optimistic about the future, right? When you're angry, you could just be irritated, or you could be really raging and furious, right? So why is this important? Well, because honestly, if you only have an article that is talking about how trustworthy you are, let's say you're reading something about Uber and it just goes on and on and on about how they're trustworthy, but their tone is completely informative and they have no pathos. Pathos is the same word we get pathetic, sympathetic, empathetic, right? It's that path word. If you have that, it's going to be quite boring. And similarly, let's say you have an article persuading you not to use Uber. If it doesn't have any type of emotion in it, you're not going to want to read it. So let's just say they have, you should not use Uber because there have been people involved in accidents or people have been robbed. Okay, well, that's just the facts, right? If I have instead a little bit of a description about someone who used Uber and was, they got into the ride and all of a sudden their driver takes them to a place that's not known to them and it's not where they were supposed to be going. They find themselves in the middle of nowhere with a stranger who they have never met before and the doors are locked. Right now I'm getting into more like that anxiety, right? Or if I describe someone whose driver, or a passenger, let's say, who stole money from the driver and held them up at gunpoint once they were picked up. They used a burner cell phone. Maybe I could describe that in a way that would make you feel angry that that was allowed to happen. Maybe I could describe it in a way that made someone feel frightened or terrified of ever becoming a driver for that company. And that would be much more persuasive for some people than me just giving you some dry facts. So, when you are trying to use pathos to appeal to people, and for you guys this week, when you're trying to evaluate pathos, what are the wide range of emotions that the person is trying to tap into? Are they looking to just make you feel disgusted, or do they make you feel disgusted and then they make you laugh at something and then they make you consider something more seriously and be contemplative and then they make you angry, right? Decide which emotions to evoke. Learn how the emotions can be evoked in your audience. For example, you can create anger or fear in your audience or persuade them to do something, or you can create a sense of joy. I'm going to zoom in here if I can. Oops. If I can. This is an ad for the Pedigree Adoption Drive. Meet Otis. Otis lives in a shelter. He sleeps a lot. There isn't much else to do. When people walk by, Otis opens his eyes and wags his tail. Then they leave. So he eats and waits and remembers. The smell of home, scratches from his owner, a squirrel he used to chase. Then he gets tired and sleeps again. When you buy Pedigree, we make a donation to help dogs like Otis find loving homes. Now, what does this ad do? It's so genius. First, look at the cute little puppy. He's so cute and adorable, and he looks so sad, and I feel so bad for him. Well, that is building up sympathy, right? And remorse, maybe, that you're not helping the dog. The other thing is that this is from Pedigree. So not only are they trying to persuade you to be kinder to animals by telling you a story about this dog instead of just saying, hey, every year 1,300 dogs are put in shelters. That's a low number. Let's say 1,300 dogs just in the city of Albany are put in shelters. Each year Pedigree tries to help those dogs. That's not as compelling, right? But it also builds up their ethos because it's saying that they're making donations, so they're a trustworthy company. That's their argument. And then you want to like adopt a dog or help Otis. I have some YouTube videos that are linked here that I normally show in class, but they're going to be on. I'm going to have a few for you on the website that you can talk about in one of the discussion boards. So, logos, the third pillar. Logos is a Greek word that means logic. So you can remember it because L-O-G, just like logic. So we had ethos about character, we had pathos about emotions, and now we're hitting people with logic. I like the little cartoon. Penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, penguins are old TV shows. That's a flaw in logic. But basically, it looks at the message of consistency in the claim or in the argument. Is it clear? Do they have solid logical reasons? How effective is the evidence? So sometimes people think that logic is just facts and statistics and numbers, and a lot of times it is. But other times it just means, does my evidence go with what I'm trying to argue? Do I make logical connections that people can follow? Is my argument organized well? And therefore, is it logical? So, using logic to persuade your audience. Having concrete evidence. You can have evidence about a company's character, about a person's character, about your own character, as we talked about with Ethos. Sometimes that's even just like connecting some of these. You have logos, you have a study. Who did the study? How are they qualified to do the study? How do we know that the study is valid? If I go in and I look for something about global warming not being real, is it just some guy talking on his computer about how he thinks the government's tricking us? Or was it an actual scientist, right? That's how ethos is used there. Pathos can sometimes be connected to logos as well, but a lot of times those are more emotional examples. So here we have, instead of just things about credibility or things about emotion, things about logic. So studies, news articles that contain facts, sometimes expert opinions, though a lot of times those go to ethos or pathos, and then statistics. So facts, statistics, numbers, basically. Types of evidence used in arguments really combine all three of these things. So when you have an argument where you are examining the evidence, you want to look to see if they have used those three pillars. How have they used character arguments? How have they used logical arguments? How have they used emotional arguments? Ethical, emotional, logical. And then, what type of evidence do they have? So, have they used facts, which are objective truths? Have they used statistics, figures, percentages? Do they have quotations from authorities that kind of go to the ethical parts of the argument? Do they use examples? A lot of times examples and then personal experiences, if you see right underneath that. Examples and personal experiences most of the time are arguments of emotion. So you want a mixture of all three of these things. If you have in your argument some facts, some statistics, some examples, some personal experiences, some quotations from experts, then you have a mixture of logic and ethics and emotion. And that's basically what we're looking for. And you want to find articles really that have a mixture of all three of these things too. Now, when I have you guys do your informative essay, an informative essay a lot of times doesn't have examples or personal experiences because it's more about just giving the logic and giving the facts. When you write a personal essay for your class, maybe not for this class, but for a different class, that's where you want to focus on examples and personal experiences because you want to write something that's more emotional and more impactful in that way. So, how do you examine evidence in an article? Well, you want to look for things that are strong. So, direct quotations. Direct quotation means that someone has, that when you're writing the article, an essay for this class, that you find a quotation and cite the study or the expert directly. An indirect quotation means that you found an article that has a quotation from a different article. And you can kind of think of that a little bit like hearsay in a trial. You don't want to have hearsay. You want to have it direct from the source because the person quoting that person might be skewing what they have to say. Valid studies. A study that is valid should be checked by people in the same field, making sure that the data was correct. Multiple pieces of evidence. This is something I find that when people first are in college composition, they kind of have a problem with. So making sure that you have more than one article, even if some of the articles are very similar. Research from people with experience and authority. Again, getting that ethos in there, but having people that know what they're talking about. So you don't want an article from me, for example, about calculus, because I don't know anything about calculus. It's the same reason that I don't let you use Wikipedia as a source, because Wikipedia is a wiki, which means it can be written by anyone. Making clear connections. Each piece of evidence somehow ties directly to the thesis statement, the central argument, and then having a mixture of ethics and emotion and logic. Weak evidence doesn't have a lot of support or explanation. That's the other thing I want you guys to work on, not just putting in evidence, but really explaining it. It won't be a valid study. It'll be biased, so super skewed one way or the other. Outdated studies or research. If you are doing an essay on, let's say, opioids, you are not going to have the same research about heroin from the 1970s as you would today. The amount of medical knowledge has changed, the amount of social impact has changed, all of that kind of thing. Also, weak evidence is where it doesn't have a clear connection to the argument. I see people do this a lot when they're writing in college composition. They find a really good quote, but it doesn't really connect to their arguments. Kind of be careful about that. And over-reliance on emotional and ethos ethical arguments, and meaning that there are no statistics to back up what they're saying, and an over-reliance on personal experience. So you don't want to do any of that. I don't want you for these papers to write in first person for that exact reason. You're writing in third person, you're not writing about yourself. And then we're going to talk about this more in our next video. When you are writing your own argument, your paragraph should include the following: PEEL. So make your point, back it up with evidence and examples, explain it, and then link it to the following paragraph. I'm going to talk about this more when you write your own argument. But basically, for when we look at rhetoric, you're looking at, does my article have strong evidence or weak? Does it have a mixture of ethos, pathos, and logos? How are those used? How are people being persuaded? Why is the article strong or weak? And who's the intended audience and what tone are they taking? So I'm going to be asking you to analyze all of those elements, and you can watch this again anytime you want, or you can just read the PowerPoint, which is also on Blackboard for you. Thanks.